An unprecedented transformation is unfolding across America that defies everything we understood about accessible dining. The nation's most economical meal option has ceased being economical. Throughout multiple decades, fast food, particularly McDonald's, functioned as the financial cushion for working Americans. It represented the destination when paychecks ran thin, when refrigerators sat empty, or when sit-down restaurant expenses exceeded budgets. Yet as 2025 concludes, that entire framework has fractured fundamentally. McDonald's pricing has accelerated far beyond wage growth trajectories, and fast food inflation is surging more intensely than nearly every alternative consumer spending category. A Big Mac that previously remained comfortably beneath the $5 threshold now approaches $6 nationwide, with major metropolitan areas experiencing even higher pricing. Low-income customer traffic has declined nearly 10% throughout the fast food sector, while higher-income clientele comprise an expanding proportion of visits. What formerly represented budget-conscious meals has transformed into guilty indulgences, luxury treats, according to over 80% of surveyed Americans. And the issue transcends mere pricing. Customers are depleted, exhausted by kiosks, fatigued by apps, frustrated by AI ordering, weary of paying increased amounts while receiving diminished value. Consumer frustration registers at unprecedented peaks, and McDonald's currently occupies the lowest position in customer satisfaction among major chains. By this analysis's conclusion, you'll comprehend why America's most affordable meal became unaffordable, and why this transformation reveals considerably more about the U.S. economy's condition than simple menu price adjustments. For generations, McDonald's transcended fast food chain status. It represented a baseline of American affordability. The logic was straightforward. Regardless of economic circumstances, whether gasoline prices spiked, rent jumped, or groceries became unpredictable, you could still reliably obtain a decent meal at McDonald's without hesitation. Yet by late 2025, that social contract has effectively disintegrated. The most obvious indicator emerges from data. Throughout the United States, the average Big Mac now sits between $5.69 and just over $6, with certain metropolitan areas creeping above $7. While that figure alone may not sound catastrophic, the increase's trajectory hits hardest. Since 2019, McDonald's prices have climbed roughly 40%. Meanwhile, compensation for numerous service sector and blue-collar workers has failed matching the authentic cost of living. You don't require an economics credential to comprehend what materializes when menu prices outpace paychecks. Families discontinue patronage, and that's precisely what the industry observes. According to internal reporting from multiple major chains, low-income traffic has fallen by nearly double digits. Middle-income visits are declining similarly, leaving exclusively high-income consumers growing as a proportion of total foot traffic. This represents unprecedented circumstances in fast food history. These restaurants were constructed on volume, massive waves of everyday Americans grabbing something quick, cheap, and predictable. When the core customer withdraws, the entire model begins wobbling. Yet affordability isn't the singular casualty. The experience itself has transformed. What previously constituted a simple walk-in, order-and-go routine now demands navigating kiosks, apps, reward systems, and sometimes even AI voices at drive-thru windows. What once felt convenient now resembles a system engineered to extract every final cent from customers receiving less value than ever. And here's the component that should concern everyone. McDonald's isn't an isolated instance. It's the canary in the coal mine for an economy where essentials cost more, wages lag behind, and everyday Americans quietly opt out of things they once took for granted. Because the genuine question isn't simply why McDonald's raised prices, but why they felt they possessed no alternative. And that transports us to this story's next layer. To comprehend why McDonald's prices surged so sharply, you must step behind the counter, not into the kitchen, but into the economics of operating a fast food giant in 2025. Because the truth is straightforward, McDonald's didn't increase its prices from greed, it increased them from necessity. The initial pressure point involves ingredients. Beef prices have sustained a multi-year upward trajectory driven by supply shortages, drought conditions, and elevated transportation costs. Poultry isn't far behind. When your global menu depends on two proteins both becoming more expensive, the cost push is immediate and unavoidable. Even French fries, arguably America's most iconic side dish, have become costlier thanks to rising agricultural inputs and logistics bottlenecks. Next arrives labor. Many states raised minimum wages throughout 2024 and 2025. And even in states where they didn't, labor markets tightened sufficiently to force higher wages. Fast food work may not be glamorous, but it's essential, and retaining staff now costs significantly more than merely several years ago. When a single restaurant needs dozens of workers, even modest wage increases translate into major expenses. Then there's the operational transformation. McDonald's has invested billions into digital infrastructure, self-order kiosks, mobile apps, loyalty platforms, and AI-enhanced drive-thru systems. These innovations aren't complementary. They require continuous software development, hardware installation, maintenance, and cybersecurity. The promise was that automation would streamline operations, reduce errors, and keep lines moving. But at least in the short term, the transition has added costs, not reduced them. Finally, franchises, who operate most McDonald's locations, face their own inflationary challenges: rising rent, utilities, insurance, equipment costs, and local taxes. These owners set prices within guidelines, meaning increases can vary from city to city and often reflect local financial reality more than corporate strategy. All these pressures collide in one place: the menu board. When beef, labor, rent, and technology all become more expensive simultaneously, McDonald's has only one lever remaining: pricing. But raising prices carries consequences. As costs climb, customers walk away, and that shift is already reshaping the fast food landscape. The most revealing aspect of this story isn't that McDonald's raised prices, it's that Americans finally stopped accepting them. For decades, fast food was the one category where consumers rarely pushed back. Groceries could become expensive, gas could spike, rent could jump hundreds of dollars. But McDonald's was always the fallback, the value choice, the affordable compromise. The "I can still swing this" option when everything else felt out of reach. Not anymore. By the end of 2025, low-income customers, once the backbone of fast food traffic, reduced their visits by nearly double digits. Middle-income households followed a similar path. And the most counterintuitive trend is this: high-income customers now represent a growing share of fast food visits. That's how upside down the economics have become. The very people fast food was created for are being priced out, while the people who don't need it financially are the ones keeping traffic afloat. But the shift isn't only about money, it's about frustration. 80% of Americans say fast food no longer feels cheap. Many say it's no longer fast. The introduction of apps, mobile deals, digital coupons, kiosks, loyalty points, and AI ordering has turned a simple transaction into a mental chore. You're not just buying a burger, you're navigating a system, and if you don't use the app, you risk paying noticeably more than the digital special right next to it. This sense of fatigue is fueling a quiet consumer rebellion. More families are cooking at home, grocery spending is up, people are meal prepping, batch cooking, or stretching leftovers in ways they didn't bother with before. Some aren't cutting back because they want to, but because they have to. When every category of living, housing, utilities, insurance, transportation takes a bigger bite out of the budget, fast food becomes one of the first sacrifices. And that's the turning point. When millions of Americans simultaneously decide that fast food is no longer worth it, the industry doesn't just slow down, it shifts. And to truly understand why this shift is accelerating, you have to look beyond the dining table and into the job market itself. If fast food has become too expensive for millions of Americans, it's not just because prices rose, it's because paychecks didn't. By late 2025, the U.S. job market has entered what many economists quietly call a great hiring freeze. It isn't a crash, it isn't a recession on paper, it's something subtler, and in many ways more damaging. A prolonged slowdown where job openings shrink, new opportunities stall, and workers feel stuck in place. The numbers tell the story. Job openings have fallen to their lowest levels in nearly a decade. Private payrolls even slipped into negative territory at points throughout the year, with tens of thousands of positions disappearing in a single month. On paper, wages are still rising, around 4% year over year, but once you adjust for inflation in housing, groceries, utilities, and especially food away from home, many workers are effectively earning less than they did before. Their purchasing power has eroded, even if their paycheck looks a little bigger. At the same time, financial pressure is intensifying. Credit card balances have climbed to record highs. Savings rates hover near post-pandemic lows. Rent consumes a growing share of income, and essential expenses, from insurance to childcare, continue to stretch household budgets. For millions of families, the margin between comfortable and struggling has vanished. This environment inevitably reshapes consumer behavior. When workers aren't confident in the job market, they stop spending on non-essentials. They cut subscriptions. They cancel outings. They choose grocery store meals over drive-thru windows. They delay car repairs, skip small luxuries, and track every dollar more carefully. Fast food becomes less of a convenience and more of a question. And here's the overlooked dynamic. Uncertainty has a psychological cost. When people feel insecure about their jobs, they rethink everything. The decision to skip McDonald's isn't just about $6. It's about protecting the little financial stability they feel they have left. But in that insecurity lies a surprising trend, one that's reshaping the American workforce entirely and helps explain why so many people are abandoning traditional spending patterns altogether. When the traditional job market freezes, Americans don't simply wait around, they adapt. And in 2025, adaptation has taken the form of a nationwide pivot towards self-employment, freelancing, and side hustles. Not because people dream of becoming entrepreneurs, but because the system is leaving them little choice. Private labor analytics show a clear pattern. Every time job openings tighten, independent contracting surges. That trend has intensified over the last 2 years. Compared with pre-pandemic levels, the number of independent contractors has jumped by nearly 50%. Early career workers, who historically relied on structured career paths, are now the fastest growing group, shifting to freelance work, gig platforms, short-term contracts, and small online businesses. For many, it's less about ambition and more about survival. If the market won't provide stability, they build their own. But this shift also changes how people spend. Freelancers face income variability, unpredictable expenses, and a constant need to manage cash flow. On good months, they might splurge on a fast food meal. On lean months, every dollar counts. That financial whiplash teaches a habit most full-time employees never learned: spending cautiously even when money is available, because next month might look different. And then there's the psychological shift. Running your own income, whether through rideshare driving, food delivery, graphic design, tutoring, or e-commerce, forces a new sense of accountability. You evaluate every expense not just as a consumer, but as a mini business operator. You ask, is this worth it? Does this bring value? Is there a cheaper option? Fast food, with its rising prices and diminishing value, rarely passes that test. At the same time, entrepreneurship exposes people to a broader view of the economy. They notice rising costs. They notice declining service. They notice inefficiencies that large corporations often overlook or ignore. As more Americans step outside traditional employment, their tolerance for overpriced and underperforming services drops sharply. This is the cultural turning point. Consumers are no longer passive. They are becoming analytical, skeptical, and value-driven. And that mindset is accelerating a much deeper economic shift, one that's now hitting entire industries simultaneously, because while individuals are adapting, several critical sectors of the American economy are quietly slipping into recession. If you zoom out from McDonald's, from fast food, and even from the job market, a clearer and more unsettling picture emerges. Multiple pillars of the U.S. economy are weakening at the same time, not collapsing, just softening in a way that slowly erodes confidence and spending. Economists call it a rolling recession, where each sector takes its turn contracting, never deep enough to declare an official downturn, but strong enough for everyday Americans to feel the pain. Housing is the first and most visible. Residential construction has pulled back significantly. Builders are sitting on excess inventory. New permits are declining, and several construction firms have quietly trimmed their labor forces. This isn't the boom and boom-and-bust cycle of the early 2000s. It's something slower and more structural. Expensive financing and weaker demand are choking momentum. Commercial real estate isn't faring any better. Office vacancy rates remain at or near record highs as remote and hybrid work continue to reshape how companies operate. Investment in the sector has fallen for consecutive quarters, and developers are delaying or outright canceling projects that once would have broken ground instantly. Restaurants and food services, ironically the very industry Americans turn to for normalcy, are also showing strain. Margins are shrinking, closures are rising, and companies face a brutal combination of higher wages, higher food costs, and customers who are visiting less often. Even iconic chains are pruning locations that no longer make financial sense. Government employment is contracting too. Federal agencies have frozen hiring, state and local budgets are tightening, and public sector layoffs are becoming increasingly common in regions where tax revenues can't keep up with falling property values. Meanwhile, freight and trucking volumes are down, signaling broader weakness in goods demand. Mining and lumber operations are slowing as construction cools, and higher education continues to face declining enrollment, financial stress, and staff reductions. None of these sectors alone creates a crisis, but together they form a quiet drag on the national mood, a background pressure that tightens household budgets and shrinks consumer confidence. And when people lose confidence, the first place it shows is in how they interact with companies, which brings us to America's newest crisis, the collapse of customer experience. If rising prices and shrinking paychecks explain what is happening to fast food, declining service explains why consumers are finally walking away. By late 2025, the United States is in the middle of a full-blown customer experience crisis, one that cuts across every industry from airlines to banks to retail, but shows up most painfully in everyday transactions like ordering a burger. The data is blunt. 77% of Americans reported a serious product or service problem within the last 12 months, the highest level ever recorded. Nearly 7 in 10 say resolving an issue now requires high effort, meaning long waits, confusing menus, unhelpful chatbots, and endless digital loops before reaching a real person. Across the board, customer satisfaction has been sliding for 4 straight years, hitting historic lows in 2025. Fast food has become ground zero for this frustration. What used to be fast, human, and relatively simple has become heavily digitized and often impersonal. You're pushed into apps, into kiosk ordering, into scanning QR codes, into joining loyalty programs just to get a normal price. Even the drive-thru, once the symbol of convenience, is increasingly automated and not always smoothly. AI ordering is still hit or miss, kiosks break or confuse customers, and in-store staffing cuts mean fewer people available to fix mistakes when they happen. This isn't just inconvenience, it's erosion of trust. When customers feel forced into systems they didn't ask for, or feel like they're doing more work than the employees, resentment builds, and in a high-cost environment, frustration converts directly into lost business. Why pay more for a worse experience? That's exactly what's happening to McDonald's and the broader fast food sector. The chain now ranks last among major brands in national customer satisfaction surveys, and consumers are responding the only way they can, by spending less, visiting less, and looking elsewhere. But all these threads, prices, wages, confidence, service, ultimately point to a much bigger question. Is fast food undergoing a temporary adjustment, or is this the beginning of a long-term structural decline? For decades, the fast food business model was built on 3 unshakable pillars: low prices, high volume, and fast, predictable service. Those pillars carried the industry through recessions, inflation spikes, and shifting cultural trends. But by the end of 2025, all 3 are under pressure at the exact same time. A rare convergence that raises a difficult question: is fast food experiencing a temporary correction, or is this the beginning of a long-term structural decline? Start with pricing. In a healthy economy, customers tolerate small increases. But when prices rise faster than wages, especially for the working class, the psychological value anchor breaks. A $6 Big Mac isn't just a menu change. It's a signal that something fundamental has shifted in America's cost structure. Once consumers feel that disconnect, winning them back becomes incredibly difficult. Then there's volume. Fast food's strength was always foot traffic. High-income customers cannot make up for the departure of millions of low- and middle-income diners. Volume losses erode margins, push franchises to raise prices even further, and accelerate the very decline they're trying to solve. On top of that, convenience, the heart of the industry, is becoming a liability. Digital ordering was supposed to streamline operations. Instead, it introduced friction, confusion, and a sense of detachment. Customers don't want to navigate apps, kiosks, or AI voices just to order the same items they've eaten for years. When the experience stops feeling effortless, the category loses its identity. Combine all of these with broader economic headwinds: weak hiring, rising debt, sectoral slowdown, shrinking confidence, and fast food finds itself positioned not as a cheap alternative, but as another line item families question during tight months. This doesn't mean McDonald's or its peers are doomed. They are powerful brands with deep resources. But the era when fast food automatically fit into every American budget is fading. And unless the industry reinvents its value proposition, convenience model, and customer experience, the next decade may look very different from the last. In the end, the story of McDonald's is simply the story of America in 2025. Prices climbed, paychecks stretched thin, and the everyday conveniences people once depended on slipped out of reach. Fast food didn't fall apart overnight. It shifted slowly, pushed by cost pressures, weakened by a fragile job market, and strained by a digital-first experience that many never asked for. The result is a country where $6 for a basic meal feels unreasonable, not because the number is shocking, but because the value is gone. And yet, this moment isn't just about frustration. It's also a turning point. Consumers are thinking differently, spending differently, and demanding something better than what they've been getting. The question now is simple: has fast food changed forever, or will it find a way back to the role it once played? If this breakdown helped you see the bigger picture, stay tuned, because the forces reshaping America's everyday life are far from finished.